Welcome back to the channel, and let's talk for a second about the British and Irish Lions and their tour to Australia next year, because I have got some concerns, I'm going to be honest. I've got some concerns. The clock is ticking. It is less than a year until the tour. In fact, it's less than a year until the tour will finish. So it's like 11 months until the British and Irish Lions set off to Australia for a 3-test series. I've got some worries. The main concern is that I'm just not feeling the energy and the buzz that there normally would be at this point before a British and Irish Lions tour. I think I know one person that's going to be there, and he is half Australian. I've heard that 40,000 British and Irish Lions fans are going to be travelling out, but I'm not feeling that yet in the way that you have done in the past. And this is also following on from the fact, let's not forget, in 2021, where the British and Irish Lions, well, I would have loved to have gone. Thousands of people would have loved to have gone to South Africa, but there were no fans there. If we have a tour with no fans, last time, which did change the feel of it, didn't it? And the next tour is a tour with potentially, and I'm saying potentially, no spectacle on the field, but a great tour for the fans that are there. Where's that going to leave the British and Irish Lions? And I'll tell you where I'm coming at this from, and I'd invite you to do the same thing. I'm coming at this with the mindset of, what would you do if you had a blank bit of paper and you were given the task, solve rugby, solve rugby's issues? Would you do what we're currently doing, or would you change it and do something a little bit different? That's what I'm going to talk about on the video, and that's what I invite you to tell me in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. And yeah, actually, let me say thank you very much for watching. I am genuinely really grateful, and I think the word I'd use today, as I say, I am humbled, because I woke up this morning to get this little notification saying congratulations on 100,000 subscribers on the channel, which I didn't imagine I would be at so soon. And I'm, as I say, really, really grateful. I think what I'm most grateful for is not just quantity, that's lovely, but it's the quality. The quality of the conversations that happen in the comments, the level of respect and humour and humility that is shown. In fact, perfect example, go and have a look at the comments after New Zealand versus Argentina yesterday, my little review of the full-time whistle. Go and have a look at all the All Black fans saying, fair play Argentina, well done. And it's always the same. So I'm really grateful, yes, for the quantity, but more than that, for the quality. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. I'd love it if you would. More importantly, I'd love it if you give your thoughts down below. Yes, I am just floating the idea. I'm not saying I don't want the British and Irish Lions to tour Australia. Don't misunderstand me. But I am just floating the idea that, are we only doing it because it's traditionally been that way? And if you were going to just, as I say, if you had a blank bit of paper and you were doing what was the most logical or the best thing for rugby, would you still do it that way? And should that mean that we rethink the way we do it in the future? Because it's happening. This tour is going to happen. I hope that Joe Schmidt can get his Australia team sorted on the field. He was handed a proper hospital pass from Eddie Jones. But clearly, Joe Schmidt isn't going to be able to solve it overnight. We could see that from that result in Brisbane against South Africa. Although I will say, caveat there, many better teams than Australia are going to lose to that South Africa side, because they are properly good. But it has to be acknowledged, Australia are in a bad place. Before I get to that, I think what's probably most important to just acknowledge is the history behind the British and Irish Lions at all. There are a lot of traditions in rugby which have gone, that get eroded away, and that's why the ones that remain are so precious. It's why a lot of rugby fans like me don't want to tolerate any back chat towards the referee, because that tradition has always been something that rugby's kept close to its heart, and we shouldn't let it go. And that's why the Barbarians, that's why the British and Irish Lions are still really, really important, because they're some of the only relics we've got left from the proper amateur era. And the first British and Irish Lions tour was in 1888, getting on for 150 years, which is incredible. And here it still is, and it's still travelling to those 3 Southern Hemisphere sides, as it has done, and in more recent years, on a 4-year cycle. So it goes to each country every 12 years, and 2025 is the year of Australia. which is just a shame because that happens to be at the time when they are possibly at the worst place they've ever been. But things do change. And should they change now? Things change. A good example of things changing from tradition, Italy joining the Six Nations in the year 2000. There were a lot of people back in the late 90s saying this shouldn't happen, tradition's important, we should keep it as it always was. It was the fight. We've already changed it from the 4 nations to the 5 nations. We can't make it the 6 nations. No one now is thinking that Italy joining the 6 nations was a bad idea. And if anything, people are saying, hold on, what about Portugal? What about Georgia? How can we help them? Same goes with the Tri-Nations. They invited Argentina to the party. I think officially they joined in 2012. And no one would argue that Argentina joining those 3 Sanzar nations to make the Rugby Championship was a bad idea. Look at the game in Wellington yesterday for an example of just how good that has made it. Look at Argentina's repeated performance in Rugby World Cups, getting to semi-finals, to see how much it has helped. And, well, is there more you can do for Argentina, as well as more you can do for Fiji and Japan and Uruguay and these other countries? So things do change, and that's where I'm coming at this from, trying to put aside any sentiment you might have for Australia and just try and think about the problem as a whole in the round. And as I say, Australia are at a low ebb, knocked out of the pool stages at a Rugby World Cup for the first time ever. They have got financial issues. The ARU, it appears to me, I don't know how the inner workings of the Australian Rugby Union are, but it appears to me like they've done a pretty bad job at running that union. Participation numbers are down, debts are up, trauma within the franchises, and constant issues with contracts and stability, which means a lot of players have gone overseas to play, and the eligibility criteria means that means a lot of them get lost for the Wallabies. And you've got this, well, it appears like it's a death spiral. I'm hoping that a solution is found, because in Australia, whilst rugby union's not having a very good time of it, AFL and NRL are going gangbusters and are pinching a lot of their talent. Obviously, the Australian Rugby Union have forked out a ton of money for Joseph Suaili, so we'll see how good he can be. I'm not sure he's going to completely turn around their fortunes. And I'll also say, as well as Suaili, who's a really talented player, maybe not the golden bullet, but I'm not going to read too much into that one result against South Africa, because Angus Bell, Taniela Tupou, potentially Will Skelton, who knows, but Fraser McWright, Liam Wright, Marika Korobeti, Samu Karevi done now? Is that all over? But anyway, there's 6 names right there. Very good players that would completely change Australia as an entity. But you just wonder if that is just a plaster going over a wound that is festering, and is it going to keep getting worse? It can't keep getting worse. I can see where Joe Schmidt's going with this team. The age profile of the current Australia team's like about mid-20s. So they're going to be better. If they stay together, play together, they're going to get better. It's a little bit like Wales. Terrible now. They could be in a much better place come 2027. And it is a Rugby World Cup on Australian soil in 2027. So they need that to work. But can it be turned around in 1 year for the British and Irish Lions tour? That is where I'm not so sure. And that's where I have big concerns about next year, because you have got the 4 nations from Britain and Ireland, the best players from those 4 nations, which basically means Ireland plus a few Scots, a few Englishmen, and maybe the odd Welshman. You've got all the best of those players going up against what looks like at the moment the worst of the single 4 nations in the Southern Hemisphere right now, the Big 4. That's not a great matchup. It doesn't look a great matchup. Now, the British and Irish Lions is different, and one of the challenges of it, rather than being like a super team, actually one of the challenges of it is taking all those players who do things differently for their countries, and in a very short period of time, getting them all on the same page and playing together. And that actually means that it could be more competitive than you initially think. But it also, I'm not sure how good it would be if it was a 3-0 beatdown. I don't know. I just worry. I think back to like 2013, 2001, the last 2 times the British and Irish Lions were there. Class players on the field everywhere. 2001, George Smith, George Gregan, and John Eales, and Joe Roth, and Matt Burke, legends of Australian rugby, were out there on the field. Maybe, I don't know, you'd have, if you were doing a combined team, this is the 3rd test, which, absolutely dynamite test series. 2-1 it finished. That Justin Harrison line-out steal right at the end, if you remember, of the 3rd test. Really, see, I remember it. How many people are going to remember 2015 in the same way that people remember 2001? I don't know. Australia were the world champions then as well. 1999, they won the Rugby World Cup. Awesome players, amazing games. But then you'd probably have, if you were doing a combined team between the two, you'd probably go about 50-50, British and Irish Lions and Australia, roughly speaking. Now, be honest, with the potential team next year for the British and Irish Lions and the potential Australian team, which Australians would you put in that British and Irish Lions combined team? I don't know that you pick any. If he keeps getting better and stays fit, maybe Taniela Tupou. If he say ditto Angus Bell, if fit and if playing consistently. Fraser McWright, if he continues the trajectory he's on, he could be in contention. I don't see it beyond that. And that doesn't mean Australia can't be competitive, but it does mean there is a big concern. So what should you do? What about Argentina? They've just got that win in Wellington against New Zealand. Do they need a little bit more of a leg up? Why don't they get a British and Irish Lions tour? One of the answers to that would be, well, tradition. It's the way it's always been. It's always been South Africa, New Zealand and Australia. But has it? In the 1920s, there was a British and Irish Lions tour to Argentina. So, 100 years later, would that be such a bad idea? The problem comes here is that would mean if you had all four, South Africa, rather than getting visited every 12 years, it would be every 16 years. Same with New Zealand and Australia. But, I don't know, is the difficult conversation to have to say, Australia, you know what, you're not going to get the next one. Because, I don't know, Argentina have done really well and you clearly got some issues to sort out. The world ranking hasn't been high enough for long enough. So go away and sort you out. And we're going to give Argentina a go. Would that be the fair and right thing to do? I mean, that'd be pretty cool. Going and seeing a test match in Buenos Aires with the British and Irish Lions, that hasn't happened for 100 years. That would be pretty cool. But then again, tradition. And the one thing is, if you even talked about taking the Lions tour away from Australia next year because it's not going to be competitive enough, that would be another nail in a coffin at the minute. That would cause a death spiral because the money and the interest that the Lions tour is going to generate next year is absolutely essential to try and help Australia get to where they're going for the Rugby World Cup in 2027. But what's it going to do to the British and Irish Lions? Like I say, we had a tour with no fans, and now could we have a tour with no proper competition on the pitch? Again, I really, really hope, genuinely, that we can watch this video in a year's time and you can have a good old laugh at me for even suggesting that might be the case. Because that would mean that it has been a really competitive series and it was really worth it and it did engage the audiences and it did really add to the mystique of the British and Irish Lions. As I say, I'm just saying I have my concerns. Also, if you were coming at this with a totally blank page, you go, right, it's 2024, we've got a stacked fixture list already. We've had talk of an £800 million Nations Cup weekend in Qatar. Actually, what would be a great way to get interest in rugby? Would the best way to do it to go, right, the four the 4 Rugby Championship nations and the 4 home unions, the British and Irish nations, could they have a little match-up? Maybe that's how you would solve the issue with Australia and Argentina. You would say in one tour it would go to New Zealand, one tour it goes to South Africa, and then the next tour it goes to either Australia or Argentina, but it's a matchup against all 4 Rugby Championship teams. Could that be a way to go? Should you just do this every 4 years? Could it be something different where you get the Pacific Island nations involved somehow and you have a little tournament that happens, a little round robin? Everyone plays each other and then there's a final match. I don't know. I'm not saying I have the answers. What I am saying is that I think it's okay to have the conversation. And we don't have to always just keep doing things the way we've always done them. I was talking when I was doing the player power ranking video the other day that I just came up with a hypothetical, this is what a Northern Hemisphere and a Southern Hemisphere 15 would look like. Would that be the way to go? Like do a rugby union state of origin Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, and do that instead of the British and Irish Lions. So then you fold in Japan and Fiji and France and Uruguay. You could have a rule where you have to have at least one player from every country. So you get the USA involved as well. Maybe that's the way to go. Again, I come at this with a blank bit of paper and the problem of how do you solve rugby? And there's a lot of issues, and I hope that the Lions tour to Australia next year is not one of them. But I'm worried that it could be one of the problems, not one of the standout moments. And anecdotally, as I mentioned, I know very, very few people. I think I know two people that are going to Australia next year. I'm sure there's many more. I've heard 40,000 people are going, but I know two. And what I also know is there doesn't seem to be the same level of interest this point out from a Lions tour that there normally is, which is why I'm having the conversation at all. I'd love it. I'd love to know what you think. I hope I haven't offended you if you're Australian, and I hope I haven't set the cat amongst the pigeons. Interesting conversation though, and one I'm sure I will revisit with your comments. I'll see you on the next video.